The war had been going on for 3 long years now. Every day brought news of another battle, another planet lost, another 1,000 soldiers who would never come home. The Galactic Coalition was tired of fighting the Vorten Empire, but they could not afford to lose. Ambassador Hana sat in her office on the Coalition capital world, reading the latest reports from the front lines. She was one of the most important diplomats in the galaxy. Her people, the Alterians, had always been good at making peace between fighting groups. That was why the Coalition Council had chosen her for the most important job of her life. Peace talks were finally going to happen. After 3 years of war, both sides were ready to sit down and talk. The meeting would take place on Nexus Prime, a space station that belonged to no one. It was neutral territory, the perfect place for enemies to meet and try to stop the killing. But Hana knew she was in danger. In the past 6 months, there had been 4 attempts to kill her. The Vorten Empire wanted her dead because they knew she was good at her job. If anyone could make peace happen, it would be her. The Coalition Council was worried about her safety. They had decided she needed protection during the peace talks. Not just any protection, but the best bodyguard they could find. The job posting was simple. They needed someone to keep Ambassador Hana safe during the negotiations. The pay was good, and the requirements were basic. Must have military experience, must be able to use weapons, must be willing to travel to space stations. They expected hundreds of applications from the best soldiers in the galaxy. Instead, they got mostly average guards and a few retired military officers. Most of the really good fighters were still busy with the war. Then a human applied. His name was Jiho Kim. His application was short and simple. Born on Earth 32 years ago. Served in the Earth Defense Force for 8 years. Had basic combat training and weapons experience. Currently working as a private security guard on a mining station. The Coalition officials barely looked at his file. Humans were new to galactic society. Earth had only joined the Coalition 5 years ago. Most people thought of humans as the new kids who did not know much about space warfare. Jiho seemed quiet and polite during his interview. He answered questions with simple yes or no responses. When asked why he wanted the job, he said he needed the money and had experience protecting important people. The interview panel was not impressed, but they were running out of time. The peace talks were starting in 1 week. They needed someone now, and the human seemed harmless enough. At least he had military training, which was more than most of the other applicants could say. They gave him the job. 3 days before the negotiations were supposed to start, Jiho arrived at Nexus Prime. The space station was huge, with thousands of rooms and corridors. It was home to diplomats, traders, and refugees from dozens of different worlds. The perfect, neutral ground for important meetings. Jiho checked into his small room near the diplomatic quarters. Then he did something that surprised the other security guards. He started walking around the station, asking questions. He wanted to know about the power systems. How many backup generators were there? Where were the main power lines? What would happen if the power went out? He asked about the air circulation. How did fresh air move through the station? Where were the main air vents? Could someone get into the vents from outside? He studied the station maps for hours. He memorized the locations of every emergency exit, every maintenance tunnel, every service corridor. The other guards thought this was funny. Why would anyone need to know so much about a space station just to protect one diplomat? Commander Nara was in charge of security for the diplomatic area. She was an Alterian-like ambassador. Hana, with blue skin and large eyes that could see in the dark. She had been doing security work for 20 years and had never lost anyone she was protecting. When she heard about the human asking all these questions, she went to find him. She found Jiho in the maintenance level, talking to a technician about the station's artificial gravity systems. He wanted to know what would happen if the gravity failed in different sections. Could it be controlled room by room? How long would it take to restart if someone shut it down? "What are you doing down here?" Commander Nara asked. Jiho looked up at her with calm, brown eyes. Learning about the station. If I am going to protect Ambassador Hana, I need to know this place. This is excessive, Nara said. We have had diplomatic meetings here hundreds of times. Nothing has ever gone wrong. The station is perfectly safe. Maybe, Jiho said, but I like to be prepared. Commander Nara watched him for a moment. There was something about this human that she could not figure out. He seemed so ordinary, so quiet, but there was something in his eyes that made her think of deep water. Calm on the surface, but you could not see what was underneath. Do not interfere with station operations, she warned him. And do not bother the staff with unnecessary questions. Yes, ma'am, Jiho said politely, but he kept asking questions anyway. The maintenance workers started to know him by name. The kitchen staff got used to seeing him check the food delivery routes. The communications technicians explained to him how messages were sent between different parts of the station. To everyone else, Jiho looked like he was just being overly careful. Maybe humans were naturally paranoid. Maybe he did not trust alien technology. Either way, he seemed harmless. What they did not know was that Jiho was building something in his mind. Every conversation, every corridor he walked, every system he learned about was becoming part of a larger picture. He was mapping the station not just physically, but tactically. Where could enemies hide? How would they move through the station without being seen? What systems would they need to control to trap people in certain areas? How could someone turn the station itself into a weapon? These were not the thoughts of a simple bodyguard. These were the thoughts of someone who had spent years learning how to fight and survive in places where the enemy could be anywhere. On Earth, humans had been fighting each other for thousands of years. They had learned lessons about war that peaceful species like the Alterians had never needed to learn. Jiho carried those lessons with him, even though he never talked about them. 2 days before Ambassador Hana was scheduled to arrive, Jiho made one final inspection of the diplomatic quarters. He checked every room, every closet, every air vent. He tested the locks on doors and windows. He traced the emergency communication lines. Everything seemed normal, but Jiho had learned long ago that when everything seemed normal, that was usually when you were in the most danger. The next day, Ambassador Hana would arrive with great ceremony. The peace talks would begin. Representatives from dozens of worlds would gather to try to end a war that had killed millions of people. And Jiho would be ready for whatever came next. Ambassador Hana arrived at Nexus Prime with 12 coalition guards surrounding her. The docking bay was filled with reporters from across the galaxy. Everyone wanted to see the diplomat who might finally end the war. She walked down the ramp of her ship wearing the formal blue robes of her people. Her silver hair was braided with small crystals that caught the light. She looked calm and confident, but Jiho could see the tension in her shoulders. She knew how dangerous this mission was. The other guards formed a protective circle around her as they moved through the station. They were all experienced soldiers from different coalition worlds, but they were used to fighting in open battles, not protecting someone in enclosed spaces. Jiho stayed at the back of the group, watching everything. He noticed which corridors had more people than usual. He saw how the station workers moved differently when the diplomatic party passed by. Small things that meant nothing by themselves, but together they painted a picture. The Grand Assembly Hall was impressive. It was a huge circular room with a domed ceiling that showed the stars outside. Representatives from 43 different species sat around a massive table made of polished stone. The air hummed with translation devices, turning dozens of languages into words everyone could understand. Ambassador Hana took her seat at the table. The other coalition diplomats smiled and welcomed her. They believed this was going to be a historic day, the day the war finally ended. Across the table sat the Vorthon delegation. Their leader was War Prince Kale, a tall figure in dark armor that covered most of his body. His species had gray skin and red eyes that never seemed to blink. He had been fighting this war from the beginning, but today, War Prince Kale spoke of peace. He talked about how both sides had lost too much, how it was time to stop the killing and find a way to live together. His words were smooth and reasonable. Many of the diplomats nodded in agreement. Jiho positioned himself against the back wall where he could see the entire room. From there, he could watch every entrance and exit. He could see all the guards from both sides, and he could study the way people moved and behaved. Something was wrong. He could not point to any one thing, but his instincts were screaming warnings. The Vorthon guards were standing in different positions than they had in previous diplomatic meetings. Jiho had studied recordings of past negotiations, and the patterns were all wrong. During the first break in talks, Jiho approached Ambassador Hana. She was talking with other coalition representatives about the surprisingly positive tone of the meeting. "Ambassador," he said quietly, "we need to talk." She looked at him with mild annoyance. "Not now, Jiho. This is going better than we hoped. War Prince Kale seems genuinely interested in peace." "That is what worries me," Jiho said. 6 months ago, his forces attacked 3 coalition supply lines. 2 months ago, they destroyed a medical station. Now suddenly he wants peace? Ambassador Hana's expression softened slightly. People change their minds when they realize they cannot win. The Vorthons have lost their last 5 major battles. Their economy is failing. Peace is their only option. Now. Maybe, Jiho said. But I have been watching their security arrangements. Something is different. Commander Nara had been listening to their conversation. She stepped closer with an expression of irritation on her blue face. "Mr. Kim," she said formally, "you are here to protect Ambassador Hana from physical threats. You are not here to analyze military strategy or diplomatic negotiations." "I understand that," Jiho replied calmly. "But I noticed some things about the station that concern me." "What kind of things?" Commander Nara asked. Jiho pulled out a small device and showed them a map of the station. 3 service tunnels that are supposed to be in use have been marked for maintenance during the talks. The defensive grid has been reconfigured since yesterday, and several Vorthon technical staff arrived this morning who are not on the official roster. Commander Nara looked at the information, but she did not seem worried. "Maintenance schedules change all the time. The defensive grid is updated regularly, and diplomatic missions always bring extra staff." "All at the same time?" Jiho asked. "During the most important peace talks in galactic history?" Ambassador Hana patted his shoulder gently. "I appreciate your caution, Jiho. Really. But you have to understand that not everyone thinks like a soldier. Sometimes when people want peace, they actually want peace." The talks resumed after the break. War Prince Kale continued to speak reasonably about territorial boundaries and trade agreements. He even offered to pay reparations for some of the damage his forces had caused. The coalition diplomats were thrilled, but Jiho noticed other things. The way Kale's guards kept checking their communication devices. How they had subtly repositioned themselves to control more of the exits. The timing was too precise to be accidental. During the afternoon session, one of the Vorthon technical staff walked through the assembly hall. He was carrying a device that looked like a standard scanner, but he moved in a pattern that covered every coalition representative. Jiho recognized it as a targeting sweep. When the technician left, Jiho quietly followed him. The man went down 3 levels to a section that was supposed to be closed for maintenance. Through a partially open door, Jiho could see equipment that definitely was not for fixing pipes or air systems. It looked like military-grade communication gear and weapons storage. Jiho returned to the assembly hall, but now he was certain something was very wrong. The question was what to do about it. If he was right, then everyone in that room was in danger. If he was wrong, he would destroy the peace talks and probably end his career. He decided to prepare for the worst while hoping for the best. During the next break, he made an excuse about checking the security systems and quietly visited several locations around the station. In each place, he made small adjustments that would not be noticed unless someone was looking for them. He rerouted some communication lines. He adjusted a few door locks. He moved some emergency equipment to locations where it might be needed quickly. To anyone watching, it would look like routine maintenance checks. By the time the day's negotiations ended, Jiho had turned the diplomatic section of the station into something very different. It still looked normal, but now it was ready for war. That evening, War Prince Kale announced that he had a special proposal for the next day's session. He wanted to hold a ceremonial signing on the station's observation deck. It would be symbolic, he said, to seal the peace while looking out at the stars. All the coalition representatives thought it was a wonderful idea, a perfect ending to a successful negotiation. Jiho thought it sounded like the perfect place for an ambush. The next morning, everyone was excited about the ceremonial signing. The observation deck was the most beautiful place on Nexus Prime. It was a huge transparent dome that looked out into space. From there, you could see the colorful gases of the Andromeda Spiral and thousands of bright stars. War Prince Kale had suggested they hold the signing ceremony there as the sun of the nearby system was setting. The light would create a perfect backdrop for the historic moment. All the news. Reporters loved the idea. Ambassador Hana wore her finest ceremonial robes. The other coalition representatives dressed in their most important clothes. Even the normally serious diplomats were smiling. After 3 years of terrible war, peace was finally within reach. Jiho requested permission to inspect the observation deck before the ceremony. Commander Nara was getting tired of his constant security checks. "The observation deck has been used for ceremonies hundreds of times," she said. "Nothing has ever gone wrong there. It is completely safe." "I just want to make sure," Jiho said. "No," Commander Nara said firmly. "You have been asking too many questions and making too many requests. We are trying to make peace here, not prepare for war. Your job is to stay close to Ambassador Hana and protect her if someone tries to attack her directly. That is all." Jiho nodded politely, but inside he felt a cold fear growing. Everything about this situation felt wrong. The location was isolated. The timing was perfect for an ambush. And the Vorthons were pushing too hard to make it happen. The diplomatic convoy moved through the station toward the observation deck. Representatives from dozens of worlds walked together, talking and laughing. They believed they were about to witness history. Jiho stayed close to Ambassador Hana, but his eyes were constantly moving. He watched every corridor they passed through. He noted which Vorthon guards were where. He memorized the positions of every exit and emergency system. The observation deck was even more isolated than he had feared. It could only be reached through 2 main corridors, both of which had to pass through security checkpoints. Once you were inside the dome, there were only 3 ways out, and all of them could be easily blocked. As the ceremony began, Jiho positioned himself near the back wall where he could see everything. The signing table was set up in the center of the transparent dome. Ambassador Hana and War Prince Kyle would sit across from each other while representatives from all the coalition worlds watched. The view was spectacular. The nearby star was setting behind a purple and gold nebula. The light coming through the dome made everything look magical. Camera crews from across the galaxy were recording every moment. War Prince Kyle made a speech about how this day would be remembered forever. He talked about putting aside old hatreds and building a better future. His words were beautiful and inspiring. Several of the coalition diplomats had tears in their eyes. But Jiho was not watching the ceremony. He was watching the guards. Vorthan's security team had quietly moved to control all the exits. They had done it so smoothly that most people had not even noticed. But to someone who understood military tactics, their positions were clearly planned. More concerning, several of the Vorthan guards kept checking small devices on their wrists. They were waiting for some kind of signal. Ambassador Hana approached. The signing table. She carried a golden pen that had been made specifically for this ceremony. The peace treaty was spread out on the table, written in dozens of different languages. All she had to do was sign her name, and the war would be over. That was when Jiho noticed the floor panels. Around the edge of the observation dome, several sections of the floor had thin lines that had not been there in the station blueprints. They were almost invisible unless you knew what to look for. Hidden panels that could slide away to reveal whatever was underneath. Jiho's blood ran cold. This was not just an ambush. It was a trap that had been planned for months. As Ambassador Hana reached for the pen, Jiho saw War Prince Kale touch something on his armor. A signal. The floor panels slid open. Vorthan strike teams rose from hidden compartments around the edge of the dome. They wore black combat armor and carried weapons that were definitely not ceremonial. There were at least 20 of them, maybe more. The coalition representatives screamed in shock and fear. The camera crews dropped their equipment and tried to run. But there was nowhere to go. The Vorthons had planned this perfectly. War Prince Kale threw off his ceremonial cloak and revealed the battle armor underneath. His face no longer showed the gentle expression of a peace-loving diplomat. Now he looked like what he really was, a predator who had just trapped his prey. "Surprise," he said with a cold smile. The coalition guards tried to draw their weapons, but they were confused and scared. They had expected a ceremony, not a battle. Most of them had never been in real combat before. They were diplomats' guards, not soldiers. The Vorthon strike teams moved with deadly efficiency. They had trained for this exact situation. Within seconds, they had control of the entire observation deck. "Nobody move," War Prince Kyle announced. "This facility is now under Vorthon control. You are all prisoners of the Empire." Ambassador Hana stood frozen at the signing table, the golden pen still in her hand. She looked around desperately for help, but her guards were surrounded and outnumbered. "This was supposed to be a peace negotiation," she said. War Prince Kyle laughed. "This was never about peace. This was about gathering all the coalition leadership in one place where we could capture or kill you. Do you have any idea how long we have been planning this?" The trap had been perfect. Too perfect. The Vorthans had thought of everything, except, for one thing, they had never faced a human soldier before. While everyone else panicked, Jiho was already moving. What happened next would be studied in military schools across the galaxy for the next 100 years. While coalition diplomats screamed and their guards fumbled with weapons they rarely used, Jiho moved like lightning. His first shot took down the Vorthan soldier guarding the main exit before most people even realized the shooting had started. His second and third shots eliminated the two guards controlling the emergency bulkhead. His fourth shot hit the manual lock on the door, shattering it and creating an escape route that his tactical mind had identified days earlier. The Vorthons had expected easy targets, diplomats and ceremonial guards who would panic and surrender quickly. Instead, they found themselves facing something their intelligence had never prepared them for. A human who had learned warfare on Earth. The difference was immediately obvious. Coalition species had evolved on peaceful worlds. When they fought wars, they did it with honor and rules. They formed neat battle lines and followed proper procedures. Humans had spent thousands of years killing each other with whatever tools they could find. They had learned that survival mattered more than honor, that victory was better than glory, that sometimes you had to fight dirty to stay alive. Jiho moved through the panicked crowd like a shadow. He used the confused diplomats as cover, knowing the Vorthons would not shoot through innocent people. He turned their own moral code against them. His weapon was not like the advanced plasma rifles that coalition guards carried. It was a simple kinetic weapon that fired metal bullets at very high speed. The magnetic shields that protected Vorthon, soldiers from energy weapons, were useless against old-fashioned projectiles. Every shot Jiho fired hit exactly where he aimed. Center of mass. Clean kills. No wasted ammunition. The Vorthons began to realize they were not fighting a normal bodyguard. This human moved like he had been born for war. He anticipated their tactics before they used them. He turned their own. Advantages against them. War Prince Kale watched his perfect ambush falling apart and felt something he had not experienced in years. Fear. "Kill the human," he ordered his strike team. "Kill him now." 12 Vorthon commandos converged on Jiho's position. They were the best soldiers the Empire had. Each one was worth 10 normal troops. They moved in perfect formation, using advanced tactics that had won battles across the galaxy. Against any other enemy, those numbers would have meant certain victory. But humans had learned to fight when outnumbered. It was one of their most important survival skills. Jiho used the observation deck's transparent walls as both cover and weapons. He shattered sections of the dome with precise shots, creating shower of sharp fragments that confused and blinded his enemies. The broken pieces became both defensive barriers and deadly projectiles. When 3 Vorthans tried to surround him from the left, Jiho triggered an emergency protocol he had memorized during his first day on the station. The artificial gravity in that section shifted, causing the soldiers to lose their balance and stumble. While they struggled to stand up, Jiho put bullets through their armor. The remaining Vorthon soldiers began to spread out, trying to use their superior numbers. But Jiho had studied the observation deck for days. He knew every corner, every piece of equipment, every emergency system. He used the ceremonial lighting system to create sudden darkness in one area while maintaining visibility for himself. His human eyes adapted to changing light conditions, faster than Vorthon vision could handle. He turned the climate control systems into weapons, creating sudden temperature changes that fogged up Vorthon helmet visors. He triggered fire suppression systems that filled sections of the dome with thick foam. Every system on the observation deck became a tool in his hands. War Prince Kale realized that his strike teams were not just losing, they were being systematically destroyed by a single opponent who seemed to understand warfare better than professional soldiers. "This is impossible," he said to his remaining guards. "He is just one human." But that was exactly the problem. The Vorthans had studied coalition, military forces. They knew how to fight against organized armies with predictable tactics. They had never encountered Earth's approach to combat. Humans did not fight like civilized species. They fought like survivors. When Jiho ran low on ammunition, he did not surrender or retreat. He adapted. Broken pieces of equipment became clubs. Emergency tools became projectiles. Even the golden ceremonial pen became a weapon when he drove it through a Vorthon soldier's visor. The observation deck had become a battlefield, but it was not the kind of battle the Vorthans understood. This was not organized warfare. This was survival combat, and humans had been practicing it for thousands of years. Ambassador Hana watched in amazement and horror as her quiet bodyguard systematically dismantled an elite strike force. She had never seen anything like it. None of them had. Coalition guards, who had been trained in proper military procedure, stood frozen, watching someone fight in ways their instructors had never taught them. Ways that seemed impossible. But War Prince Kale still had one final card to play. Hidden around the observation deck were explosive charges. If he could not capture the coalition leadership, he would kill them all and blame it on a terrorist attack. The galaxy would believe that extremists had destroyed the peace talks. He activated the detonation sequence. 20 seconds until explosion. Standing over Ambassador Hana's unconscious form, with laser burns across his shoulder and blood running down his face, Jiho heard the beeping countdown and made a decision that would change galactic history. He stopped fighting and started talking. Not to the Vorthons, but to the station's computer system. 15 seconds until detonation. The remaining Vorthon soldiers hesitated, confused by this sudden change. Why had the humans stopped fighting? Why was he talking to empty air? They could not see what Jiho was really doing. His 3 days of security sweeps had not been about paranoia. They had been about learning every system on the station, including the emergency protocols that could be activated by voice command. "Computer," Jiho said calmly while ducking behind an overturned table. "Authorization code Bravo 77. Emergency lockdown of observation deck. Override all other commands." "Authorization confirmed," the station computer replied. "Emergency. Lockdown initiated. 12 seconds. Heavy blast doors began sliding closed over the transparent dome. The station's emergency systems had detected explosives and were automatically trying to contain the damage. The charges would still explode, but now the blast would be trapped inside reinforced barriers. War Prince Kale realized what was happening. "Stop him!" he screamed at his remaining soldiers, but it was too late for that. 9 seconds. Jiho was not finished. While the Vorthons scrambled toward his position, he continued talking to the computer in a voice so calm he might have been ordering lunch. "Emergency protocol Delta 9. Evacuate atmosphere from observation deck in 5 seconds. Maintain life support in emergency shelter Alpha 7 only." "Confirmed. Atmospheric evacuation beginning. 6 seconds. The observation deck's atmosphere began venting into space through emergency ports. In moments, everyone in the dome would be breathing vacuum, everyone except the people in emergency shelter Alpha 7, which happened to be the reinforced alcove where Ambassador Hana and the other coalition diplomats had taken cover. Jiho had planned for this possibility days ago. 3 seconds. The Vorthon. Soldiers realized they were about to die in an explosion and vacuum at the same time. Some tried to reach the emergency shelter. Others attempted to override the blast doors. A few simply stood frozen in shock. War Prince Kale made one final desperate attempt to reach the detonation controls, to stop the countdown he had started. 1 second, Jiho threw himself over Ambassador Hana's body and activated the emergency force field around the shelter. 0. The explosion was enormous. 20 shaped charges designed to breach the station's hull went off simultaneously. The blast should have killed everyone in the observation deck and vented the entire diplomatic section into space. Instead, the explosion was contained within the reinforced dome. The blast doors held. The atmosphere had already been evacuated, so there was no pressure wave to cause additional damage. The Vorthon strike team was eliminated instantly. War Prince Kale and his soldiers were gone, erased by their own weapons. The coalition diplomats and staff, protected inside the emergency shelter, survived with nothing worse than ringing in their ears. But the most important thing was what happened next. Jiho had not just stopped the ambush. He had been recording everything since the moment the trap was revealed. His emergency protocols had automatically transmitted the complete tactical analysis to every coalition military command and every major news network in the galaxy. The footage showed more than just a failed Vorthon ambush. It showed what a single human could accomplish when properly motivated. It revealed capabilities that no other species had suspected. The psychological impact was immediate and devastating. Coalition. Species that had thought of humans as primitive newcomers suddenly realized they had allied themselves with apex predators. The quiet bodyguard who had seemed so ordinary was actually a walking weapon system with tactical abilities that surpassed their best military computers. But even more shocking was the intelligence analysis that Jiho had compiled during the battle. While fighting for his life, he had been observing Vorthon combat techniques, equipment capabilities, and tactical limitations. His human brain, evolved for warfare, had been processing information that revealed critical weaknesses in the Empire's military structure. The data packet he transmitted contained complete tactical assessments that would have taken coalition intelligence months to develop. Weak points in Vorthon armor, flaws in their command structure, vulnerabilities in their technology. But the most devastating intelligence was strategic. The ambush itself had revealed that the Vorthon Empire was much weaker than anyone had realized. They had risked their entire war effort on a single desperate gamble. Their military was not the unstoppable force that coalition propaganda claimed. They were actually losing the war so badly that they had to resort to tricks and traps to survive. Within hours, the footage was being broadcast on every world in coalition space. Military analysts studied every second, trying to understand how one human had defeated an entire elite strike team. The Vorthon Empire's military leadership watched the same footage with growing horror. Their intelligence estimates about human capabilities had been completely wrong. If one human could do this much damage, what could 1,000,000 humans accomplish? More importantly, the failed ambush had revealed their desperation to the entire galaxy. Every species now knew that the mighty Vorthon Empire was weak enough to attempt assassination instead of honest negotiation. Their reputation for strength was destroyed in a single day. Emergency medical teams reached the observation deck 3 hours after the explosion. They found Jiho sitting quietly beside Ambassador Hana, checking her vital signs and making sure she was comfortable. He had several wounds from the battle, but he had refused to seek medical treatment until he was certain she was safe. When the medics asked him what had happened, he gave them a simple report. Vorthon strike team attempted to capture coalition leadership. Threat has been neutralized. Ambassador Hana is uninjured but unconscious. Request immediate medical evaluation. That was all he said about the most important battle in galactic history. But across the galaxy, military leaders were already drawing their own conclusions about what it meant to have humans as allies or as enemies. The war did not end with massive space battles or grand surrenders. It ended with a single transmission sent from the deepest bunkers of the Vorthon homeworld 3 days after the observation deck incident. The message was addressed to the Coalition, High Command, and marked with the highest priority codes. It contained only 12 words. The Vorthon Empire formally requests immediate ceasefire negotiations. We surrender unconditionally. The transmission was signed by the Vorthon High Council, not by any military commander. War Prince Kyle had been their most experienced battlefield leader. With him dead and their elite strike teams destroyed, the Empire's military structure had collapsed almost overnight. But the real reason for surrender was much simpler. They were terrified. The footage from the observation deck had been analyzed by every military intelligence service in the galaxy. The Vorthons had studied it more carefully than anyone else because they needed to understand what had gone wrong with their perfect ambush. What they discovered kept their leaders awake at night. The human had not just won through superior firepower or advanced technology. He had won through pure tactical thinking. He had turned their own trap against them, using nothing but his understanding of warfare and his ability to think faster than they could react. Worse, the intelligence analysis suggested that this was not unusual human behavior. This was simply how humans fought when they were serious about winning. The Vorthon Military Council had run computer simulations based on the observation deck battle. They had tried to calculate what would happen if humans began joining coalition. Military forces in large numbers. The results were terrifying. Every simulation ended the same way. Complete Vorthon defeat within 6 months. Coalition species fought with honor and followed rules. They could be predicted, countered, and defeated through superior strategy. But humans fought like they were trying to survive against impossible odds, because that was exactly what they had been doing for thousands of years on their home world. Ambassador Hana recovered from her injuries 2 weeks after the incident. She woke up in a medical facility on the Coalition capital world, surrounded by flowers and messages from leaders across the galaxy. The first person she asked to see was Jiho. She found him in a small waiting room reading reports on a tablet. Computer. He was wearing civilian clothes instead of his bodyguard uniform. His left arm was still in a medical support brace, but otherwise he looked completely normal. "Hello, Ambassador," he said politely when she entered. I am glad to see you are feeling better. Jiho, she said, sitting down across from him. Do you understand what you did? He looked confused by the question. I protected you during a hostile situation. That was my job. You ended a war, she said. Single-handedly, the entire Vorthon Empire surrendered because of what happened on that observation deck. Jiho shrugged slightly. I just did what needed to be done. Ambassador Hana studied his face, looking for some sign of pride or satisfaction. She found nothing but calm professionalism. The Coalition Council wants to give you their highest medal for valor, she said. They want to make you a hero. I would prefer not, Jiho said. I did my job. That should be enough. The military commanders want to interview you. They want to understand your tactics so they can train other soldiers. I cannot help with that, Jiho said. What I did was not something you can teach in a classroom. It comes from growing up on a world where everything is trying to kill you. Ambassador. Hana had read the classified reports about Earth's history. She knew about the constant wars, the competition for resources, the need to fight just to survive. But she had never really understood what that meant until now. Is that why you applied for this job? She asked. Because you knew something like, this might happen? Jiho was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was very soft. On Earth, we have a saying, hope for the best but prepare for the worst. I hoped the peace talks would succeed, but I prepared for them to fail. And now I would like to go home, he said. My contract is finished. The war is over. There is no more need for bodyguards. 3 months later, Jiho Kim returned to Earth on a commercial transport ship. He had declined all requests for interviews, refused all medals and honors, and turned down several job offers that would have made him rich and famous. He went back to working as a security guard on a mining station, but across the galaxy, everything had changed. The Vorthon surrender had included reparations that would take decades to pay. They had given up half their territory and agreed to limits on their military that would prevent them from threatening anyone again. More importantly, every species in the galaxy now understood that humans were not the primitive newcomers they had appeared to be. They were survivors from a world that had taught them to be very good at war. Coalition military recruiters began visiting Earth regularly. They offered excellent pay and benefits to any humans willing to serve in galactic defense forces. The response was overwhelming. Within a year, human soldiers were stationed on bases throughout Coalition space. Their reputation spread quickly. They were polite and professional, but there was something about them that made even veteran warriors nervous. They moved like they expected trouble. They prepared for situations that other species never considered. And when fighting actually started, they won with an efficiency that was both impressive and frightening. The galaxy had learned an important lesson from the observation deck incident. Humans might look peaceful, but they were peaceful the way. A sleeping predator is peaceful, calm and quiet until someone gave them a reason not to be. 5 years after the war ended, Ambassador Hana was elected Secretary General of the Galactic Coalition. In her acceptance speech, she talked about the importance of peace and cooperation between different species. But she also mentioned something else. We must remember, she said, that sometimes peace can only be maintained by those who are very good at war. We are fortunate to have humans as our allies, because they understand both the value of peace and the cost of losing it. In the audience, several human diplomats nodded quietly. They understood exactly what she meant. Somewhere in the outer colonies, Jiho Kim was probably sitting in a security station, reading reports and drinking coffee, watching for trouble that might never come. But if it did come, he would be ready, and so would humanity.